A millionaire abandoned his twin children in the deserted forest and left without looking back. What he didn't imagine was that a German shepherd was watching everything from hiding. What this animal did changed the fate of these children forever. On a journey of courage, protection, and divine justice, prepare for a story that will touch your soul. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment where you are watching from. The gray sky seemed to weigh on Eleanor's shoulders as she watched. Through the blurred window of her room, the raindrops violently hitting the glass. 68. Years of life marked by joys and losses, but none comparable to the emptiness that now inhabited her chest. Exactly a year ago, her only daughter Louise left this world after a fierce battle against cancer that gave no quarter, leaving her alone, with memories and a house too big for a widowed lady. Silence. This was now her only faithful companion. A silence that screamed louder than any crowd, that whispered in sleepless nights, and that pursued her through the empty rooms of that house that once overflowed with laughter. On that particular morning, not even the constant noise of the storm could drive away the loneliness that consumed her from within, like a slow and persistent flame. Eleanor ran her gnarled fingers over the photographs arranged on the antique wooden dresser. Images frozen in time. Her late husband Albert, her daughter at different stages of life, the 5 grandchildren who now lived in other states, too busy with their own lives to visit their grandmother more than twice a year. Could she blame them? Life followed its natural course, like the waters of a river that never stops. While she remained stagnant on the banks, just watching, the phone rang, interrupting her melancholic contemplation. Who could it be on a Sunday morning? Maybe one of the grandchildren, remembering their grandmother? Or would it be another one of those calls from persistent salespeople who seem to have a special talent for calling at the most inconvenient times? Hesitantly, Eleanor answered. "Ms. Eleanor?" a young, unfamiliar female voice asked. "My name is Sarah. I'm a social worker at the municipal animal shelter. I'm calling because we found your contact information among Ms. Agnes's belongings." Eleanor felt her heart clench. Agnes, her childhood friend, companion in youth, confidant for decades. They had lost touch in recent years, ever since Agnes began showing the first signs of dementia and was taken by her nephews to a nursing home in the capital. Or at least, that's what Eleanor believed until that moment. "Ms. Agnes?" Eleanor's voice came out trembling. "What happened to her?" "I'm sorry to inform you, but she passed away last night in her sleep." The voice on the other end of the line tried to be professional but couldn't completely hide the compassion. "It was peaceful. She didn't suffer. We found a letter addressed to you among her belongings, along with your phone number." The world seemed to spin around Eleanor. Another loss, another piece of her history crumbling like dust in the wind. How many more would she have to bear before her own time came? "There's one more thing, Ms. Eleanor." The social worker paused. Significantly, Ms. Agnes left very specific instructions about something she wanted you to receive. It's not exactly common, but she insisted so much that we promised to fulfill her wish. Eleanor frowned, confused. "And what might that be?" "A cat, madam. An elderly cat named Jasper. Ms. Agnes rescued him almost 10 years ago, and he was her constant companion. In the documents she left, it states that she wished for you to adopt him after her passing." "A cat?" Eleanor almost laughed at the irony. She, who had always preferred the company of dogs, who never understood Agnes's fascination with felines, was now being designated as the guardian of one. "But I don't know how to take care of cats, and I'm too old to learn new skills." "I understand your concern, Ms. Eleanor, but he is also advanced in age. We've tried to find a specialized shelter, but the truth is that elderly cats are rarely adopted, and the places are always full." The social worker paused calculatedly. "Ms. Agnes mentioned in the letter that you had a promise. Something about guardians of silence, that's how she wrote it." Those words hit Eleanor like lightning. Guardians of silence. A teenage pact made under the moonlight, on a night of confidences and eternal promises. They had sworn to always take care of each other, to be there even when the rest of the world turned its back. It was a code only theirs, forgotten by time, but which now returned with the force of an avalanche. "Can I bring Jasper and the letter this afternoon?" the social worker asked, interpreting Eleanor's prolonged silence as acceptance. "He's a bit scared with all the changes, but he's very docile and independent. All he needs is a quiet place to spend his last years." Eleanor looked out the window one more time. The rain had lessened, leaving only a fine, constant drizzle. Like her, Jasper was alone in the world, a survivor from another era, displaced in times that were moving too fast. Perhaps it was fate playing one of its elaborate tricks, uniting two beings abandoned by life. "Yes," she finally replied, with a decision that surprised even herself. "Bring him. I will honor my promise." When she hung up the phone, a strange feeling came over Eleanor. It wasn't exactly hope, she was too old to harbor such feelings, but something close to curiosity. What would it be like to share her loneliness with another solitary creature? 3 hours later, the doorbell rang. Eleanor, who had spent the afternoon organizing a little corner for the new resident, felt her heart race. On the other side of the door was the social worker, a young woman no older than 30, holding a carrier box from which two amber eyes watched her with suspicion. "This is Jasper," Sarah introduced. "He's a little stressed from the trip, but just give him time. I also brought Ms. Agnes's letter and some instructions on his care." Eleanor received the box carefully, as if carrying a fragile treasure. From inside, a low, hoarse meow echoed, like a polite complaint from someone not used to making demands, but wishing to express their discontent. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said, also taking the envelope Sarah extended. "You can leave him. It's just him and me now." When the door closed, Eleanor gently placed the box on the living room floor. She knelt with difficulty. Her knees weren't what they used to be, and opened the flap, letting the animal decide when to come out. She then sat on the sofa, opening her lost friend's letter with trembling fingers. "My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, it means I have left this world and our Jasper is now in your care. I ask for forgiveness for imposing this responsibility without consulting you first, but I know your generous heart and know you would not refuse this last request from your old friend. Do you remember when we were girls and made plans never to be alone in old age? How time mocks our plans. I ended up alone in a shelter, you in an empty house, both survivors of everyone we loved. But I found in Jasper a companionship that saved me in recent years. He is not just any cat, Ellie. He understands silence like no one else. In the first few days, he will be distant, observing your every move. Do not be offended by this. Like us, he carries invisible scars, wounds that time could not completely heal. In all these years we were apart, I thought of you every day. I wish I had had the courage to seek you out when my mind was still clear. But pride is a hard habit to break, even when we are on the verge of the abyss. I hope you can forgive me. Take good care of him, Ellie, and allow him to take care of you too. Sometimes we find comfort in the most unexpected places. Forever your guardian of silence, Agnes. A solitary tear slid down Eleanor's wrinkled face. So many lost years, so many conversations that never happened, so many moments that would forever remain in the realm of unfulfilled possibilities. And now, all that was left of her childhood friend was an old cat and a farewell letter. A subtle movement caught her attention. Jasper had come out of the box and was now observing her, from a safe distance, still as a porcelain statue. He was a large cat, with gray fur and white patches on his chest and paws. One of his ears was partially torn, a mark of some old battle. His eyes, however, were what drew the most attention. Deep, watchful, almost human in their intensity. "So, it's just us now, isn't it?" Eleanor spoke softly, without making sudden movements. Two survivors trying to figure out what to do with the time that's left. Jasper blinked slowly, as if considering those words. Then, with the characteristic dignity of felines, he turned and disappeared down the hallway, exploring his new territory with methodical caution. The days that followed established a curious routine between the two. Jasper kept his distance, appearing only for meals, and disappearing again into some corner of the house. Eleanor respected his space, talking to him occasionally without expecting a response, as if conversing with a shy old friend. A week after Jasper's arrival, Eleanor was woken in the middle of the night by a strange noise. She opened her eyes to find the cat sitting at the foot of her bed, his amber eyes glowing in the darkness like little moons. He was meowing softly, an almost melodic sound that seemed to call out to her. "What is it, Jasper? Are you hungry?" Eleanor turned on the bedside lamp, confused by this unusual behavior. The cat jumped off the bed and walked to the door, where he stopped and looked back, as if waiting for her to follow. Curious, Eleanor put on her slippers and accompanied him down the dark hallway to the living room. There, Jasper jumped onto the windowsill and fixed his gaze on the deserted street outside. Eleanor approached, intrigued. Through the glass, she saw a figure moving stealthily in the garden of the neighbor's house, belonging to Ms. Genevieve, an 82-year-old widow who lived alone like herself. The hooded man seemed to be testing the windows, looking for an entry. Without hesitation, Eleanor picked up the phone and called the police. Then, still under Jasper's watchful eyes, she called Ms. Genevieve's son, who lived a few blocks away. In less than 15 minutes, sirens cut through the silence of the night, and the intruder was apprehended. As she watched the commotion from the window, Eleanor felt a warm weight against her legs. Jasper was there, leaning against her, purring softly. It was the first time he had sought physical contact. "You saved Genevieve tonight, you know," Eleanor whispered, kneeling with difficulty to lightly stroke the animal's head. "How did you know something was wrong?" Jasper's eyes seemed to smile at her, guarding secrets that would never be revealed. News of the near burglary spread quickly through the neighborhood. The next day, Ms. Genevieve herself came to thank her, bringing a homemade cake. It was the first time in months that Eleanor had received a visit that wasn't from the grocery delivery person or the mailman. "I never really liked cats," confessed Ms. Genevieve, observing Jasper, who maintained a polite distance, but hadn't hidden as he usually did when strangers appeared. "But this one seems different. There's something in his eyes. He belonged to my childhood friend," Eleanor explained, serving coffee. "I think he understands more than most people." Ms. Genevieve smiled. "My son insists that I move in with him after what happened. He says it's not safe for an old lady to live alone." "And what do you think about that?" Eleanor asked, recognizing in her neighbor the same dilemma she herself faced with her children. "That I'm too old to start over," Genevieve replied with a sigh. "This house holds my memories. But after yesterday, I confess, fear has set in." Eleanor watched Jasper, who now seemed to be paying attention to the conversation. An idea began to form in her mind, as unexpected as it was welcome. "You know, Genevieve, I've been thinking about starting a book club, just for ladies like us who prefer the company of books to television. We could meet once a week, alternating houses." Genevieve's tired eyes lit up. "A book club? It's been years since I've been part of anything like that. Do you think we could get more participants?" "I'm sure we could," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her own enthusiasm. "There are several ladies in the neighborhood who live alone. We could start with something light, maybe The Little Prince. It's a book that always brings me comfort." As the two elderly women animatedly planned their book club, Jasper jumped onto the sofa and settled between them, as if approving the initiative. For the first time since her daughter's death, Eleanor felt a small flame of purpose ignite within her. In the following weeks, Eleanor's house, once so silent, began to come alive. The book club grew quickly, attracting 12 ladies from the neighborhood, all with similar stories of loneliness and loss. They met on Wednesdays, alternating houses, discussing literature and inevitably sharing pieces of their lives. Jasper, to Eleanor's astonishment, seemed to thrive on the activity. Instead of hiding during the meetings, he circulated among the ladies, carefully choosing whose lap he would settle on at each gathering. Curiously, he always chose the one who seemed most downcast or sad that day. "This cat has a gift," commented you. Ms. Martha, one of the club members, after Jasper spent an entire afternoon on her lap the day she received the news that she would need delicate surgery. "It's like he knows who needs comfort the most." Eleanor just smiled. She had already noticed this special trait of Jasper. The cat seemed to have an extraordinary sensitivity to human suffering, especially the silent kind, hidden behind forced smiles and calculated words. One morning, 3 months after Jasper's arrival, Eleanor woke up feeling a strange oppression in her chest. It wasn't pain, but a heavy sensation that made it difficult to breathe. She tried to get up, but dizziness made her fall back. She needed to call someone, but the phone was in the living room and she could barely stand. "Jasper," she called, in a weak voice. "I need help." As if understanding the gravity of the situation, the cat appeared immediately at the bedroom door, looking at her intensely. Eleanor tried to get up again, leaning on the headboard of the bed, but her legs gave way, and she fell to the floor with a thud. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was Jasper, darting out of the room like a gray arrow. When she woke up, she was in a hospital bed, with tubes and monitors connected to her body. Beside her, Ms. Genevieve was dozing in an uncomfortable chair. "Genevieve!" Eleanor called out, her voice hoarse and weak. Her friend woke up immediately, her eyes red from crying recently. "Ellie, thank goodness you're awake. We've been taking turns. Staying with you for 2 days now." "Taking turns?" "Yes, all of us from the book club. No one wanted you to be alone, even unconscious." Eleanor felt tears well up. "What happened to me?" "Heart attack," Genevieve replied, holding her hand affectionately. "But you were very lucky. If Jasper hadn't acted so fast, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Jasper, but how?" Genevieve smiled. "That cat is a miracle, Ellie. After you fainted, he went to my house, goodness knows how he opened the screen door, and kept scratching and meowing like crazy. When I opened it, he ran back to your house. I followed him and found you collapsed, in the bedroom. The doctor said minutes made all the difference." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. "And where is he now?" "With Martha. We're taking turns caring for him too. In fact, he's organizing the whole neighborhood. I've never seen anything like it." In the following days, Eleanor received a flood of visitors, not just the ladies from the book club, but her children and grandchildren, who had traveled in a hurry upon receiving the news of her heart attack. The nurses commented on how rare it was to see an elderly patient receive so many visitors. On a particularly busy afternoon, Eleanor was surprised to see her granddaughter Olivia, 22 years old, enter the room carrying a familiar carrier box. "I brought someone who was missing you terribly," the young woman announced, opening the box. From inside, Jasper emerged with his characteristic dignity, looking around as if assessing whether the location was suitable for his presence. "Jas," Eleanor exclaimed with genuine joy. "How did you manage to bring him, Liv? Hospitals don't allow animals." Olivia smiled conspiratorially. "Let's just say I made a deal with the head nurse. She has an autistic grandson who loves drawing, so I promised some private lessons in exchange for this special visit. But we have to be quick." Jasper jumped onto the bed with surprising agility for a cat his age and settled beside Eleanor, purring so loudly that the machines could barely pick up her heartbeat. "He saved your life, Grandma," Olivia said, stroking the cat. "Ms. Genevieve told us everything. It's like he's your guardian angel." Eleanor smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. "He's not just my angel. I think he was sent to take care of all of us." The young woman watched her grandmother for a few moments, thoughtful. "You know, Grandma, I have something to tell you. After all this, I talked to my parents and, well, I decided to transfer to the university here. They have an excellent art program, and I can finish my degree living with you if you'll have me as a tenant." Eleanor's heart, now repaired by stents and medication, seemed to want to leap from her chest. "Live with me, but your whole life is in the capital, dear." Olivia shrugged. "Life is where we choose to build it. And after almost losing you, I realized I've been wasting too much time away from the people who really matter." She paused, smiling playfully. "Besides, I've always wanted a cat." When Eleanor was finally discharged 2 weeks later, she found her house transformed. The friends from the book club had organized to clean everything, fill the refrigerator, and prepare frozen meals for the first few days. Even more surprising, The guest room had been converted into a cozy bedroom for Olivia, with a desk for her studies and an easel for her paintings. "I hope you don't mind the changes," her granddaughter said, gently guiding her by the arm to the living room. "The ladies from your club are impressively efficient when they work together." Eleanor couldn't speak, too moved by everything that was happening. She sat on the sofa, where Jasper was already waiting for her, as if he knew exactly the time she would arrive. "There's one more thing," Olivia continued, nervous. "While you were in the hospital, the ladies from the club and I had an idea. Since you always loved teaching, you were a teacher for 40 years after all, we thought about turning part of your living room into a small studio for art classes for kids in the neighborhood. It would only be twice a week, and I would help with everything." "Classes for kids here in my house?" Eleanor looked around, visualizing the walls that for so long had only witnessed loneliness now filled with colorful drawings and children's voices. "If you don't like the idea, we can forget about it," Olivia quickly added, interpreting her grandmother's silence as disapproval. Eleanor took her granddaughter's hand in hers. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever planned for me," she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. "And I think Jasper will love all these children." As if understanding he was being mentioned, the cat stretched languidly and jumped onto Eleanor's lap, settling down like a guardian satisfied with his work. The art classes began 2 weeks later, with 8 children between 6 and 10 years old. Eleanor, initially apprehensive about not having the energy to deal with little ones anymore, was surprised to feel a renewed vigor teaching basic painting and drawing techniques. Olivia handled the more practical part, while she supervised and told stories about famous artists, blending facts and fiction in a way that kept the children fascinated. Jasper, contrary to all expectations, became the main attraction of the classes. Instead of fleeing the noise and commotion, he circulated among the children like an attentive supervisor, occasionally sitting next to the one who seemed most insecure or frustrated with their work. "This cat understands art better than many critics out there," Olivia joked after observing Jasper spend an entire afternoon next to Ethan, an autistic boy who rarely interacted with other students but who, in the presence of the feline, seemed more relaxed and focused. The book club continued to grow, now with 20 participants and a waiting list. The meetings became anticipated social events, with elaborate teas and occasionally lectures by guest university professors invited by Olivia. In one of these lectures about children's literature, an idea emerged that would definitively change the course of Eleanor's life. "You should write your stories," suggested the young professor after hearing Eleanor narrate a fable she used to tell her daughter. "You have a natural talent for storytelling." "Me? Write? At almost 70? Eleanor laughed, but the seed had been planted. That night, while everyone slept, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with a notebook Olivia had left there. Jasper jumped onto the chair beside her, watching her with his penetrating eyes. "What do you think, Jazz? Can an old retired teacher become a writer?" The cat blinked slowly, which Eleanor had learned to interpret as a sign of approval. And so, without great pretensions, she began to write stories inspired by her life, by her art students, by the ladies of the book club, and especially by Jasper. Stories about second chances, about late beginnings, about friendships that transcended species, and about the healing power of art. 6 months later, to her complete surprise, a small local publisher showed interest in publishing a collection of her short stories. The book, modestly titled The Guardians of Silence, featured on its cover the illustration of a gray cat with amber eyes, sitting beside a white-haired lady. It was Olivia who created the image, perfectly capturing the essence of the relationship between Eleanor and Jasper. On the day of the launch, a small bookstore downtown was packed. The ladies from the book club attended in full force, many bringing family members. The children from the art classes came with their parents, proud to have their stories serve as inspiration for some of the tales. Even the doctor who had cared for Eleanor during her hospitalization was present, fascinated by his patient's extraordinary recovery. "I've never seen anything like it," he confided to Olivia. "Your grandmother didn't just recover physically, she seems to have rejuvenated. Her blood stress markers have decreased, her blood pressure is controlled, Even some initial signs of dementia we detected in tests seem to have stabilized. It's as if she found an elixir of youth. Olivia smiled, watching her grandmother, who, at that moment, was signing books with Jasper comfortably settled on a special cushion beside her. "I think she simply rediscovered her purpose," she replied, "and she had an excellent guide in the process." At the end of the evening, exhausted but radiant, Eleanor returned home accompanied by Olivia and some of the club ladies who insisted on preparing a small celebratory dinner. As they chatted animatedly about future plans, including writing workshops for seniors and the expansion of the art classes, Eleanor felt Jasper jump onto her lap and knead his paws against her chest, a gesture he rarely made. Looking into the animal's eyes, she had an epiphany. "You know what I realized today, Jazz? The silence that used to scare me so much didn't disappear. It just transformed." She stroked the cat's head, which was purring softly. "Now it's a silence full of possibilities, not absences." That night, before going to sleep, Eleanor opened Agnes's letter again, rereading the words that now made even more sense. "We find comfort in the most unexpected places," her friend had written. How right she was. A year after Jasper's arrival, Eleanor's life was unrecognizable. Her house, once a mausoleum of memories, pulsed with life. The living room walls proudly displayed her students' drawings. The library shelves grew with books donated for the book club, and Olivia's room was permanently occupied, as her granddaughter had decided to stay even after completing her studies. Even more impressive was the transformation of the basement, converted into a small community center for neighborhood seniors. What had started as art classes and a book club grew to include creative writing workshops, senior-friendly yoga, and a support group for people who, like Eleanor a year ago, were facing loss and loneliness. And at the center of it all, like an invisible thread connecting all these initiatives, was Jasper. The cat, now 13 years old, quite elderly for a feline, continued to exert his mysterious healing influence, moving silently among the participants of the various activities, always seeming to know exactly who needed his company. "He's a therapist disguised as a cat," joked Ms. Genevieve, who now coordinated the support group, having discovered a natural talent for empathetic listening. On an autumn morning, exactly 1 year after Jasper's arrival, Eleanor woke up to the sound of rain hitting the window, just like on that fateful day. But unlike that occasion, she felt no melancholy. The sound now brought a comforting feeling, a reminder of the life that continued outside, always renewing itself. Jasper was at the foot of the bed, sitting with his elegant posture, watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the world. "Good morning, my guardian of silence," Eleanor greeted him, extending her hand to stroke him. "A whole year has passed, you know." The cat blinked slowly, as if acknowledging the special date. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, he jumped onto the dresser where she kept the family photographs. With a delicate movement of his paw, he specifically touched the picture frame that held the photo of Agnes and Eleanor together, taken decades ago, when they were still young and full of dreams. "You miss her too, don't you?" Eleanor got up and picked up the picture frame, looking at the smiling faces frozen in time. "Sometimes I wonder if she knew what you would do for me. If she imagined, even for an instant, that by leaving you to me as an inheritance, she was actually giving me the greatest gift of all, a new chance to live." Jasper meowed softly, jumping back to the floor and walking to the door, where he stopped and looked back, as he had done that night when he saved Ms. Genevieve. "All right, I get it," Eleanor laughed, putting the picture frame back on the dresser. "It's time to start the day. We have a lot to do." And together, the white-haired lady and the gray-furred cat went downstairs, ready for another day of their extraordinarily ordinary lives, united by a bond that transcended words and species, guardians of a silence that now was full of meaning. That night, after a particularly busy day with a special storytelling workshop for underprivileged children, Eleanor sat on her porch, contemplating the stars that dotted the dark sky. Jasper rested on her lap, seemingly asleep, but she knew his senses remained alert, always vigilant. You know, Jazz, she whispered, stroking the animal's soft fur. Sometimes I wonder if you aren't some kind of angel in disguise. Agnes always believed in those things, in greater forces that guide our paths when we least expect it. The cat opened one eye, watching her with that familiar intensity that always seemed to see beyond words, straight into the soul. I was dying, you know. Not physically, at least not yet, but inside. Every day a piece of me disappeared, carried away by the wind of loneliness. If you hadn't appeared, her voice broke, choked with emotion. If Agnes hadn't insisted on that old promise. Jasper stretched languidly, adjusting his position to be face to face with Eleanor. His amber eyes reflected the moonlight, creating the impression that they shone with their own light. I am grateful every day that you came into my life, my friend, for showing me that it's never too late to start over, to open the door we thought was locked forever. A solitary tear slid down Eleanor's wrinkled face. You taught me that silence doesn't have to be empty, that loneliness is a choice, not a sentence. As if perfectly understanding every word, Jasper stood up and lightly touched Eleanor's face with his paw, a gesture so gentle and precise that it seemed more human than feline. Then he rested his head on her shoulder, as friends who know the value of silent comfort do. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky in a bright, fleeting line. Eleanor smiled, remembering how, as a child, she believed that each shooting star was actually an angel on an urgent mission. Mission accomplished, isn't it, Jazz? She whispered, gently hugging the cat. Mission more than accomplished. And so, under the starry mantle that covered that small town, a lady no longer lonely and her unlikely guardian shared much more than a moment. They shared the comforting certainty that the strongest bonds are often invisible, woven not with ropes or chains, but with small daily gestures of compassion, understanding, and presence. The story of Eleanor and Jasper, of late beginnings and renewal that never comes too late for those who allow themselves to open their hearts, would continue to unfold in chapters yet unwritten. But one thing was certain, the silence that had once been her tormentor had now transformed into a friend, a sacred space where the soul could rest without fear, because it would never truly be alone again. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle of all, discovering that even in the darkest moments when all doors seem closed and all paths blocked, a simple meow, a compassionate look, or an old promise is enough to light the way back home again. A home that is not always made of bricks and tiles, but of connections that remind us that we belong to something greater than our small individual existences. Guardians of silence. That was what they had promised to be so many decades ago. And now, through unexpected paths and an unlikely messenger, that promise was finally fulfilled in its purest and truest form. Not as guardians of an empty and oppressive silence, but as protectors of a full and welcoming silence, where unspoken words are as eloquent as those pronounced, and where loneliness transforms, finally, into solitude, that precious state, in which being alone no longer means being abandoned, but simply being at peace.